And the All Whites so close.
RNZ News at 5. Ahi Mādie ko Evie Ashton tēnei. GPs throughout the country are reporting patients are travelling hundreds of kilometres to get into clinics because they can't get in anywhere else. And it's estimated as many as 4,000 people in Invercargill aren't enrolled at a doctor's clinic amid a dire shortage of doctors there. Waihopai Health Services Director, Ser Vermont, says he's been trying to hire a new GP for about 3 years with no luck. He says he's worried about the patients who are missing out on healthcare.
From a public health point of view, I mean, these people are going to end up worse off. They'll become less healthy. They'll end up using more expensive secondary services, hospital services in particular. Will turn up at A&E. They'll crowd the A&E, which is also happening, and it just becomes overwhelming.
Ser Vermont says the situation has become dire. The Green Party is calling on the new COVID-19 Minister, Aisha Verrall, to ensure vulnerable communities are prioritised as part of the pandemic response. An independent review released yesterday concludes the Health Ministry failed to equitably meet the needs of Māori and Pacific peoples during last August's Delta outbreak. The Greens COVID-19 spokesperson, Tiano Tuiono, says the findings are entirely unsurprising.
And I'm hoping that Minister Verrall will get back to focusing on making sure that we listen to the people that need to be listened. This research, all of this stuff confirms what we already know. We've just got to make sure that we implement those lessons.
The Greens also want a pandemic action plan for schools to be put in place to keep students safe over winter. A Kingsland resident says she felt violated as she watched her beloved van involved in a ram raid in Auckland. Emily Roughton's vehicle was stolen on Friday night, and CCTV shows the stolen van smashing through the front door of the Still shop in Mount Albert this morning before the offenders loaded it with stolen goods. She says the self-contained van had been a dream project for her and her family.
Pretty gutting, to be honest. Yeah, it's horrific. I mean, it's just a car, it's just stuff, but you work really hard to get those kinds of things. It was sort of a dream van, a dream project. My dad did a lot of work on it for me over the lockdown.
Emily Roughton says after seeing the footage, she would not want the van back. Moving care and protection of Māori children from the state to iwi has been endorsed at the inquiry into abuse in care. The Royal Commission is this week holding a hearing focusing on state foster care. A witness, Auckland University senior lecturer in social work, Ian Hislop, says it's imperative Māori be allowed to administer care and protection services for their tamariki. He says it's consistent with developing better services for children.
You've got to have trust, you've got to have a relationship, you've got to have people who are prepared to work with you. And state social workers struggle very much in that process. So for Māori, by Māori services are always going to work better in that area.
Dr Hislop says it recognises authority that already exists in Te Tiriti o Waitangi. The Trust, supporting former Gloria Vale members, says the Christian community's court action against Westland Milk shows contract losses are hitting a nerve. Canaan Farming Dairy has sought a High Court injunction against Westland Milk, which announced it would stop collections from 3 farms following an employment court ruling. Liz Gregory from the Gloria Vale Leavers Support Trust says the legal action shows the community is in fighting mode. She says Gloria Vale's leaders should instead concentrate on arranging proper employment contracts for staff. Operators of smaller planes in Hawke's Bay say the local airport is forgetting its core business. The region's airport is investing in solar farms and business parks, and some say that's at the expense of aviation. Some operators have tried to build hangars and get permission for their private business planes, but they say there's been pushback or they've been ignored. To sport, and the All Whites coach Danny Hay is laying the blame for their World Cup demise with football's governing body, FIFA. Costa Rica beat New Zealand 1-0 in Doha this morning to grab the last spot at November's tournament. Striker Chris Wood appeared to score a first-half equaliser, but it was controversially overturned by the video referee, while the referee also denied the All Whites a penalty. Hay says the officiating simply wasn't up to international standard.
FIFA have made a mistake there in such an important game. They've let us down by putting somebody in charge that clearly has not officiated at this sort of level.
Unwanted All Blacks halfback TJ Perinara is among 11 debutants named in the Māori All Blacks squad to play Ireland. Halfback Brad Webber, who also missed out on the All Blacks, is also in the Māori squad. England cricket captain Ben Stokes has hailed their 5-wicket win over the Black Caps the greatest of his career. The hosts easily chased down 299 to win the second test at Trent Bridge. Stokes rates the win better than their World Cup win over New Zealand in 2019.
We are going to go out and play the way that, we speak about it in the media and, the language that we speak in the dressing room. Today's just been, still struggling to really find words for what we witnessed out there today. It was just phenomenal.
England have an unassailable 2-0 lead in the series. And star shooter Aaliyah Dunn is leaving the Pulse netball team. The 22-year-old has been the most accurate New Zealand shooter in the competition for the past 4 seasons. That's the news.
An early start for football fans.
Hard getting everyone out of bed this morning, but they knew the football was on, so once I reminded them of that, they were shot out of bed and came up,
The goal that wasn't sent emotions soaring.
People here are quite frustrated first with the goal that got fouled by the referee.
And a loss, but hope for the future.
It's unbelievably raw for the New Zealanders because they played really well and couldn't have done any more than what they've done now.
Your news goal, Morning Report weekdays from 6 on RNZ National.
You're on Checkpoint with Lisa Owen next. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Thursday. In the west of the North Island, from Northland to Kapiti, also for Coromandel and the Central High Country, showers, some possibly heavy, easing this evening, then becoming more frequent and heavier again tomorrow, south of Te Kuiti. Bay of Plenty, Gisborne to Wairarapa and Wellington, generally fine, but isolated showers in the Bay of Plenty, the Tararua district and North Wellington. Showers are clearing from the Bay of Plenty this evening. For Bulla and Westland, showers turning to rain tomorrow, isolated thunderstorms today. Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, also north and central Otago, mainly fine, but showers are developing south of Kokoda tomorrow afternoon or tomorrow evening. Dunedin, Clutha, Southland and Fiordland, showers, some heavy, becoming confined to Fiordland and the south coast this evening. Showers are spreading elsewhere again tomorrow afternoon, snow lowering to 600 metres tomorrow evening. And for Chatham Islands, Rekohu, showers, some heavy with hail, gale westerlies. It's 7 minutes past 5. I'll update you with the latest headlines and traffic at 5:20.
Nā mihi iwi, tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai ki Checkpoint I tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. GPs say people are having to travel hundreds of kilometres just to get a 15-minute doctor's consult amid the GP shortage that's seen half the country's clinics close their books to new patients. They're worried about the thousands of people who are finding themselves locked out of the overloaded system and warning the government's already beyond a crisis. Katie Todd reports.
With no Invercargill GP clinics currently taking enrolments, Waihopai Health Services Director Dr. Sia Vermont says the city is in the middle of a slow-motion disaster.
The care of our patients in our communities is decreasing because many of them can't get enrolled. I understand it's between 3,000 and 4,000 in Invercargill patients unenrolled. That's pretty dire.
He's been trying to hire a new GP for his clinic for 3 years. No one is interested. In the meantime, the clinic can't take any casual visitors because the existing doctors are flat out. Some Invercargill locals are now going to extreme lengths for a consult.
We've got patients who are travelling to Dunedin to get care, just for GP visits.
Northland GPs believe they might be in an even worse situation. At Broadway Health in Kaikooi, Dr. Tako Kistemaker estimates he has about 2,000 patients on his books. People are travelling for hours to get to his clinic because the family doctors in Kaitaia and Kawakawa are all shut to new enrolments. He fears for those who can't get in a car and travel.
Kaikooi is still open, but that is only, not that we can cope, but there's no alternative for the people there. It's not close to a hospital, etc. So I think the situation in Northland is dire, very, very dire.
Whangarei GP Dr Tim Cunningham explains the work in Northland is extra hard because the region has high levels of poverty, complex health issues and a significant geriatric population. His clinic, Central Family Healthcare, has also shut its books to new enrolments and he's working 70-hour weeks to keep up. He says efforts to lure more GPs to the region have been unsuccessful. On top of the workload, which he says makes general practice an unbelievably unattractive specialisation, GPs in Northland tend to get paid less than other parts of the country.
Last year in Northland they had 10 GP training places. They managed to fill 7 of those. By the end of the year, 5 of the 7 trainees had quit. There were 2 left. One of them said, well, I'm going to Auckland where I get paid better. And the other one said, well, I don't want to be a GP. This is too hard for nothing and I'm going to do public health.
Dr Tim Cunningham believes the only solution is for the government to pour a lot more money and resources into primary care and fast. He says for about 18 of the past 19 years, the government's failed to keep up with inflation in the subsidies it pays GP clinics. In short, that means GPs can't ask their patients to pay more and they're earning less. Meanwhile, Dr Tim Cunningham doesn't think the government's done enough to attract more GPs to the workforce. Given GP shortages are a global issue, he isn't holding out hope for an overseas influx.
Places like Northland are definitely the canary in the coal mine. We really are going to see dramatic adverse health effects by the primary care sector being decimated. There's some overseas evidence that if you spend $1 supporting primary care, it probably saves about $4 in care down the track. So that's type treatment of blood pressure, diabetes, early screening of other health things.
Tim Cunningham says he's gobsmacked that the government thinks GP clinics will be able to keep coping with the status quo.
Well, joining us now is University of Waikato Professor of Population Health, Ross Lawrenson. Kia ora, Ross. How have we got this so wrong in terms of juggling supply and demand for doctors?
I think this has been a long-term issue, Lisa, hasn't it? And I think your commentators there have noted that general practice has not really kept up as far as the remuneration and the funding available for GPs. But, you know, New Zealand's got a shortage of doctors in general. We increase the number of doctors that we have on our registration by 500 doctors a year. We have 300 a year retire and 50% of those are GPs. And yet we're only training 500 doctors. So we are very dependent on importing doctors from overseas.
So when you say there, those figures, they're interesting. We are training more doctors than we need as GPs, but are those doctors choosing to go into other disciplines? Is that part of our problem?
Yes, absolutely. You know, the specialist careers are more attractive.
Do you mean financially and lifestyle-wise?
Both, absolutely, you know, both financially and lifestyle-wise. So I think, you know, that's been the big challenge. The Medical Council have just recently released their updated figures on the medical workforce, and now only 25% of doctors work in general practice. That used to be around 40 to 45%. So, you know, every year we're getting more and more specialists, but the proportion of doctors who are GPs is falling.
How do we set the number of spots there are in medical schools? Because it raises the questions of why we don't simply train more doctors.
That's a very good question. It's partly a matter of funding from TEC, but it's also from workforce advice from the ministry. And you know, we did have an uplift of 200 doctors a year being trained back in 2010, 2011, but since then we haven't updated the numbers. So we increased the number of doctors by around 4% per year, but we're not increasing the numbers of doctors for training, and we haven't had any uplift for the last 10 years.
Why not?
That's a very good question, Lisa. We put up the proposal at the University of Waikato for a new medical school. New Zealand only has 2 medical schools. There is a lack of diversity of the sorts of medical programs that are available in New Zealand, and there's no doubt that we need to be training more doctors for the future.
Yeah, so tell us about that proposal, because you're still, hopeful that it will come to fruition at some point. How would your selection process be different from the other medical schools?
I think that, first of all, we've proposed a graduate entry medical program. So that means that people who've already got an undergraduate degree can come into the program, and then it will be a 4-year training program, so it'll be a much more intense program than the current 6-year programs at Auckland and Otago. So you get a quicker production of doctors at the end.
What about quality, though, then, if you're pushing them through in a shorter period of time?
I said it's a more intensive program. So first of all, you've got adult learners who've already shown their ability to study, so they've got an undergraduate degree already. But the second thing is, at the moment, the training programs for Auckland and Otago are around 176 weeks over the 5 clinical or the 5 medical years. We would have exactly the same number of weeks of contact time. We'd just do it in 4 years.
How do you make sure those people go to the places we need them, though? Because this is part of the problem.
So one of the aspects of our proposal was that we would have a longitudinal placement year. Now, Otago University do that for 20 of their 300 students, and that's been a very successful program. Our proposal was that all of our students would do a longitudinal placement.
What do you mean by that?
Well, rather than doing, 6 weeks of obstetrics and 6 weeks of paediatrics in a tertiary hospital, you would go to a rural area such as Thames community and spend a whole year working in that community. So you'd become part of that community. You would learn about what it was like living in a community like that, but also you would learn all of the important things that you need to learn on the job in a community like that. So you'd still have, your lectures would be come in and out by Zoom, but your actual on-the-job learning would be done in the locality rather than in a tertiary hospital.
Do you reckon we've got a crisis on our hands when it comes to GPs?
Yes, absolutely. I gave a lecture when I started at the University of Auckland 17 years ago about the impending crisis, and it's only got worse. This is a chronic problem. We used to have 85 GPs per 100,000 population in New Zealand in the start of the primary care strategy in 2000. We've now got 75 per 100,000. They have 120 per 100,000 in Australia. So, we are, and you can see the crisis because it just means that people are having to go to the emergency department and are waiting until they are sick and need to be seen in hospital, and that puts added costs on the whole system.
Thank you for joining us this evening. That is Ross Lawrenson, who's a Professor of Population Health at the University of Waikato. The rapidly rising price of diesel is going to put more pressure on household budgets as it filters through to almost every corner of life, according to the AA. Per litre, diesel's gone up more than $1.30 in the past year, a bigger jump than 91. That's gone up just over 80 cents a litre. It means in some places the two are rubbing shoulders price-wise. Today at the pump, Checkpoint could see diesel at $2.94 a litre and 91 at $3.11. Unfortunately, the AA says the worst is still to come and it's going to linger. Its Principal Policy Advisor, Motoring Affairs, Terry Collins, explains why.
What's happened is that as the post-COVID and the logistics train, all the trucks have started moving, all the parts have started moving, there's been a great demand for diesel. It's been exacerbated by the Ukrainian-Russian conflict, where Russia was a big exporter of diesel into Europe. Globally, demand is exceeding supply. Inventories are about 25% below the 5-year average, so there wasn't a lot of fuel stocks available, and that classic supply and demand has driven the prices upward.
Terry, what can we expect coming down the pipe in terms of flow-on effects? Freight, farm goods, travel, the works.
It is the works. If you think about it, just for something like an item like food, you need tractors and you need machinery to plant the food. Corn, etc. You then need to have harvesters to harvest it. You need a truck to take it from the farm to the factory to be processed. Then that processed food goes to the store. And every one of those vehicles probably runs on diesel. So it's going to have a huge inflationary effect. For some farmers, it's just become significant inputs into their harvesters, their tractors, and the machinery that they use to harvest food.
How long can we expect this to go on for?
I expect that and petrol prices to get probably worse. Although it's very hard to pick with international pundits, most of the major banks and people who predict these things are predicting that we could go up to about $140 US to $150, could be even $160 by year's end. We're currently sitting at about $120, and the rough rule of thumb is for every $1 a litre a barrel goes up, it's 1 cent at the pump. So there could well be another 30 to 40 cents a litre added on. And of course, if it's petrol, if the government's got to be concerned about when it puts the fuel excise duty back on the 15th of August, because that'll add another 30 cents. And so the pain's going to get greater, unfortunately.
You're edging towards $4 there, Terry.
For 95 we are. And what a lot of people, well, I'll give you a couple of components around it. Extras that we haven't currently got in is we've got the emissions trading scheme. Okay, currently that's about 18.5 to 20 cents a litre, at about $76 to $80 a tonne. The government is capping that, but ultimately it wants a price indicator of $250 a tonne. So that's going to triple it. So if we're paying about 20 cents now, that's another 40 cents. If they put the Fed back on, the fuel excise duty for fuel, that's another 30 cents. If the fuel goes up to $150 a barrel, that's another 30. Well, you've got $1 there already. It's gone up, and then we put, and then GST's got to go on top of that. So there's your $4.
You mentioned the discount that the government has extended to everyone with the cuts to the fuel tax and road user charges. What do you want to see happen when that comes off in August, if indeed it does? How should that be handled?
Well, one of the things I think is always a risk is there's two ways they could do it. We all know that there's a date called the 15th of August. So if they were to do it suddenly and put the full amount on, which is about 30 cents, I could imagine there'd be queues of vehicles in the preceding days wanting to fill up as much as they can before the price rise, which is going to put pressure on supply. If they were to do it gradually, announce it, say it's whatever amount, 5 cents a week or fortnight or something like that, and gradually do it, that would get rid of some of that spike in demand and that long queues going out onto the road, which probably would be the preferred option. Although I do understand some oil companies have actually suggested that they do it by surprise overnight and just say, hey, the tax is going back on. I don't think that would work very well. I think people would be quite disgruntled about all of a sudden having such a big jump in fuel prices.
Terry, do you think they should keep it? And if so, how long for?
Well, I think in August, the prices of fuel are going to be dearer than what they are today. So it's a very difficult decision for the government. If they don't put it back on at some stage, they have to find that money elsewhere. The AA's view is that many of our roads are not maintained to the level that they are, and many of the repairs are not up to the standard that they should be. So we need to be able to fund those better repairs, and we need to fund those better roads. So if we don't do it through this hypothecated tax, which is we collect that money from petrol and road user charges to build and maintain our roads, then we have to find it through general taxation or some other way.
So it's a false economy giving us a discount at the pump when we've got other maintenance and infrastructure that needs that tax dollar, is what you're saying?
It is. The National Land Transport Fund requires more money to meet the desires of the program, which is to put more medium strips in, do better speed reviews, improve the engineering of the road. So we can't have it both ways. We can't unfund it because we won't get that better roading that we require. And so if we want to maintain it or improve the funding, we've got to find that money somewhere.
Terry, can we expect prices to drop to, say, what they were a year ago?
I don't see that happening in the foreseeable future. I don't see it happening before the end of the year, and I probably don't see it happening next year as well. And one of the reasons is because the sanctions around Russia, they will be able to sell their oil to countries that aren't going to obey by the sanctions, countries like India and China. But it takes a long time to flick those logistics around from pipelines to shipping. They're predicting two things. Even if they do sell it, they're going to drop production of about 3 million barrels of oil a day. That's what Kuwait supplies to the market. So that's a huge impact. The other one that people aren't aware of, if they do start shipping it, most of the insurers are from Western countries. And if those insurance companies have sanctions on them, they won't be allowed to insure the shipment And that's extremely important because it's not just the ship and the oil that is insured, it's the liability in case these things like the Mobil Exxon Valdez disaster in Alaska, which cost billions to repair. And so without insurance, the shipping companies won't want to touch any of that fuel, so that's going to tighten the supply up even further.
So, Terry, you're basically forecasting 2 more years of motoring misery for people if they run a petrol or diesel vehicle.
Yes, unfortunately.
And that was Terry Collins from the AA. It is 24 minutes past 5. You're with Checkpoints on RNZ National. Homai o whakaaro, we would love your feedback. First off, on diesel prices, how much is it costing where you are? Do send us a text. If you're in business, I'm also interested to know if the freighting costs have filtered through to you yet. Let us know the effects of those price jumps. And on GPs, how far are you having to drive to visit the GP, and can you get in to a clinic? Some of them are not taking new patients. You can text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or you can send us an email, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Time to get to the headlines now. Ko iwi anō tēnei.
Thanks, Lisa. GPs say people are having to travel hundreds of kilometres just to get a 15-minute doctor's consult amid the doctors' shortage that's seen half the country's clinics close their books to new enrolments. And in Invercargill, Waihopai Health Services Director, Sia Vermont, says he's been trying to hire a new GP for about 3 years with no luck. The AA is warning that the rising cost of diesel will be putting more pressure on household budgets. The price per litre has doubled in a year and now sits just below $3. Terry Collins from AA told Checkpoint it's a serious problem as most farm vehicles such as harvesters run on diesel. An Auckland resident says she felt violated when she saw her beloved van was involved in a ram raid. Emily Rowton's vehicle, which was stolen on Friday night, was on CCTV footage this morning, smashing through the front door of the still shop in Mount Albert. She says the van had been a special family project. The Green Party is calling on the new COVID-19 Minister, Ayesha Verrill, to ensure vulnerable communities are prioritised as part of the pandemic response. The Greens also want a pandemic action plan for schools to be put in place to keep students safe over winter. And Pharmac is widening access to the safe-sex drug pre-exposure prophylaxis, or PrEP, which can reduce the risk of being infected with HIV by up to 99%. Those are the headlines. Looking at traffic, nothing to report in any of the main centres at the moment. We'll keep an eye on that for you and we'll update you with the latest news headlines and traffic at about 5:40.
Now, mihi Evie, Auckland Council is cutting back on red tape, approving many substituted building products on site to help get the industry through a plasterboard supply crisis. It's also loaning out its building inspectors to other regions to help them speed things up too. Fletcher Building's GIB board dominates about 95% of the market, but demand is outstripping supply and it's having to ration GIB, leaving some houses unfinished and some builders struggling to stay afloat. Now, this week, regulators and industry leaders met to come up with some solutions. Auckland Council's already changed how it does things, cutting paperwork needed to substitute GIB for a generic plasterboard instead. Jeff Farrenson from its regulatory services team explains how his council's helping ease the plasterboard crisis.
The majority of our standard plasterboard substitutions are being approved on site by the inspectors as minor variations. That's where you have plasterboard that's not used for bracing or fireline or acoustics, which is about 80% of the houses.
So are you telling me that 80% of the houses are using substitute plasterboard at the moment rather than GIB?
No, that's just, sorry, the 80% is about 80% of the plasterboard used in a house is standard GIB. And so those can be substituted just by a minor variation approval on site. Because of the current product shortages out there, it's not just plasterboard. We have started increasing the scope to help builders on site not delay their jobs. Where we can approve things on a lower risk scale, we will definitely try.
Well, do you reckon some of this bottleneck could have been avoided if you'd started doing this earlier?
No, not at all. This is basically a shortage of products, not a shortage of inspectors or amendments. So when we see this, these products being substituted on site, as they increased, we basically would change our process to match that. There was no bottleneck.
What percentage of plans that are submitted for consenting specify jib rather than plasterboard?
Oh, I could only guess here, and I would say it would be in the 90% plus range.
So that is the majority of architects and designers actually filling in jib board when they could potentially be using some other form of plasterboard.
That's right.
Okay. So there are 5 or 6 plasterboards that MB has approved, right? And has submitted a list to councils to provide you with all the information. Why didn't you allow those to be signed off in the manner that you're doing now previously?
We were. We've actually provided this feedback back to MB as part of their process change. But we've been doing it for a while now. I mean, probably off the top of my head, maybe the last 6 months we've been seeing products being substituted in this manner.
So what made you make the change?
The amount. We are looking at 40 to 50 requests a day on building sites across Auckland. So out of the 800 inspections we're doing a day, we're getting about 40 or 50 requests to change products. So we had to basically make a change in terms of our process to make it easier.
Jeff, when they request a change, are you just talking about plasterboard, or are there other products as well they're wanting to make substitutions?
Products. Yeah, other products, definitely.
What else is causing them problems that they need substitutions for?
There's a whole range. There's plywood, there's insulation products. Pretty much I could go through a whole house and see the type of product substitutions we're experiencing currently.
Is that because of supply issues?
At the top of the list. Yes.
So what are you hearing about supply issues with these products?
The vast majority have alternatives out there available in the market. I think plasterboard is probably one of the products that we see where where customers are needing to import from overseas to make up the shortfall.
Do you think, Jeff, that there has been a bias in the system, and when I say this, I mean including your council, towards jib board?
Not our council, no. In fact, our councils will only approve what's provided to us in the application, which is the designer's and owner's decision.
Yeah, so on that subject, can someone write on plans that they will use jib or similar, or do you require a single product to be specified?
It's actually it's written in the Building Act. It can only be a single product, unfortunately. So if they do provide other alternatives in there, they do have to select one.
So what do you think of that and how that means things work?
It means that the planning stage or the design stage needs to be pretty set before the building consent. Now, we do know that changes happen during construction, and that's why the amendment and minor variation process is in place.
Would it help the council if people were able to say and similar in their application, or similar?
I think it would definitely help in some situations. However, you'd have to be mindful of the scope. You could end up having whole buildings changed if you had or similar non-plans, and it would be very difficult to assess and approve a lot of these changes on site. So they may slow things down by requiring amendments if there is a lot of changes. There is obviously reasons behind having it set in terms of the specified product on the plans, and that goes back to an Act level, and that is from the government to decide whether or not they wish to loosen that up.
Jeff, does the council ever consult with Fletcher's or any of its divisions on technical advice regarding other plasterboards?
We're in regular contact with a lot of the main suppliers and manufacturers. We talk about all sorts of things.
But are you asking Fletcher's for technical advice regarding other plasterboards or products that are being substituted for their product?
No.
Never done that?
No, not that I know of. Generally, we'll talk to Jib about their own products.
You mentioned you're doing quite a few inspections at the moment. 800 a day, was it?
Yes.
Yeah, so, I mean, what is the wait like and how much pressure is that putting on your resources?
In Auckland, we're fairly under control. We saw it coming, and over that COVID period where it just went gangbusters. We did a lot of recruiting in Auckland Council, so our wait times are currently averaging 3 days for an inspection across the region.
Do you know how that compares with others?
I don't know. We're in regular contact with other councils and try and actually provide help where we can, where they have got delayed wait times.
How so?
Well, we've got a couple of inspectors down here in Christchurch at the moment helping out that council.
Okay, so are you loaning out some of your inspectors to other regions?
Just a couple at the moment. That's all we can afford to loan out. Yeah.
Absolutely. So where have they been, Jeff?
In Christchurch.
But anywhere else?
Yeah, Tauranga. We've had a couple of inspectors down there a little while ago. That's pretty much it for now.
And that's Jeff Farrinson from Auckland Council. It is 25 minutes to 6. Kia mau tonu mai. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National, and it's time to get to the business news. Ko taku hoa inai called Giles Beckford, who joins us live from Wellington. Hey Giles, not-for-profit organisations got their backs to the wall. What's that about?
Kia ora to you, Lisa. Yes, it's a report that's come from the consultancy Grant Thornton, and they've said there have been some significant changes in the sector, the legislation that governs not-for-profits. Now, we should define them as there might be cooperatives, there might be environmental groups, social groups, could even be your local sporting club. But, there's a law that governs the broad scope of them. It's worth $20-odd billion for the economy. So it's not chicken feed, and they employ or engage something like 145,000 people. So, they aren't insignificant in that regard as well. But the report shows that they really have got their back to the wall. They're struggling to find people. They're struggling to comply with recent law changes. Now, these aren't just law changes that about filing records and the like. These are significant ones such as privacy, data protection, the way they handle complaints and issues within the workplace, all the sort of things that could cost them significant amounts of money if they get it wrong. And it would seem that many of these organisations, in fact, of course, don't have the physical, financial or people resources to actually comply and do a job that's necessary. The upshot being, of course, is that if they're in a weakened state, then they don't deliver to their members, they don't deliver to their social groups, their communities, what they said they were going to deliver. And that, of course, has the effect of putting people off, saying, well, why bother with that group? Why give them money? Why support them with my time if they actually, just fall short all the time? So, interesting report, of, I think, quite interesting reading, important reading for a lot of people who will be involved in these sorts of organisations.
OK, the other thing that's got everyone a chatter, Giles, the Federal Reserve meeting. Why does it matter so much? I
got badgered by somebody as I was going out for lunch today, and they said, what you keep going on about that US Federal Reserve for? And I thought, well, because a lot of our stories saying the market turmoil is all generated by people waiting to see what the Fed does. So I thought, well, why is it important? Well, it's the biggest central bank in the world, first of all. It steers the world's biggest economy. It dictates quite often the progress of interest rates around the world. The US dollar. The US dollar, well, dairy products, for instance, are denominated in US dollars, so it matters directly to us. The US is our third biggest export market. So all of a sudden, you've got to see that the Federal Reserve, what it says and what it does, is influential, and it actually does matter. So all eyes on that Fed meeting tomorrow morning. Comes out, I think, at 6 o'clock our time. The argument is whether it's a 0.5 percentage point rise in their discount rate or it's a 0.75% rise. And how stern is their talk? The chair, Jerome Powell, a mild-mannered man, but people go through the minutes and the comments from the Federal Reserve like they were people in a Greek temple going through the chicken entrails. That's how closely they follow it. It will drive what happens on financial markets tomorrow, and so we should, at least be aware of it. and accept that what they say and what they do will provoke a reaction through financial markets around the world, and will be among the first markets in the world to actually experience it.
Yeah, and I'll be interested to see what happens, but I'm also back with the fact that they let you out for lunch. Giles, we've only got a nanosecond for
somebody.
We've got a nanosecond for the market, so whip through.
I thought I was going to bring you a ray of sunshine. The market turned positive this afternoon. Ran out of puff in the last half an hour. Top 50 index down 5 points. We won't bother about the final number, just a fraction of a percent that. New Zealand dollar 62.2 US cents and 90.2 Australian.
Thank you, Giles. Giles Beckford there with business news. It is almost 20 to 6. You're with Checkpoints on RNZ National. Well, after 6, we're short of GPs. What about other health specialists, with many expected to reach their twilight years before there's anyone ready to fill their shoes? Don't forget, we would love your feedback. Homai o whakaaro, text us 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or you can email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Anei a iwi mina pitapita kōrero.
Tēnā koe, Lisa. Councils are being encouraged to approve alternatives to GIB because of supply shortages. But Auckland Council says it's been doing this for 6 months. Jeff Farrington told Checkpoint the council's also been seeing substitution requests for plywood and insulation because of supply issues. The AA is warning that the rising cost of diesel will be putting more pressure on household budgets. The price per litre has doubled in a year and now sits just below $3. Terry Collins from AA told Checkpoint it's a serious problem as most farm vehicles such as harvesters run on diesel. GPs say people are having to travel hundreds of kilometres just to get a 15-minute doctor's consult amid a doctor shortage. Ross Lawrenson from the University of Waikato told Checkpoint that more doctors going into specialist careers has contributed to the shortage. The local share market has been unable to hold on to modest gains and closed lower for a fifth consecutive session. The benchmark NZX 50 index fell in early trading but turned positive early in the afternoon before fading at the end to close 5 points lower. Smaller aeroplane operators in Hawke's Bay say the local airport is forgetting its core business. The region's airport is investing in solar farms and business parks, and some say that's at the expense of aviation. And the first flight scheduled to take a small group of asylum seekers from the UK to Rwanda was cancelled today after a last-minute legal challenge. Those are the headlines. Looking at traffic, all the winds have eased and any crashes have been cleared, so your commute home should be as it usually is on a Wednesday evening. I'll update you with the latest news and weather at 6.
Brilliant. Ngā mihi, Evie. When is an airport an airport? Turbulence is brewing in Hawke's Bay with accusations the region's airport is more focused on commercial business interests than actual aviation. It all comes during a complete shake-up in management with several changes in staff. Our Hawke's Bay reporter Tom Kitchen explains.
Once again, welcome on board. At Hawke's Bay Airport, some say you'll soon be welcomed to a solar farm or industrial site rather than an airport. Whilst the airport opened its newly renovated terminal last year, it also wants to build a solar farm in a 10-hectare business park. And that doesn't make entrepreneur Sean Colgan particularly happy. He wants to have an aeroplane that can fly in and out of Napier to support his business interests, but he needs an airport hangar to do so. I ask him how the airport's been treating him.
Well, they haven't been treating us at all. They won't answer any questions.
He says it doesn't make sense.
All the other airports welcome airplanes. That's what they do. Only in Napier do you have this dichotomy of we're an airport but we don't want airplanes.
Tony Johnson's in the same position. He also wants to build a private hangar. He's been trying to speak to the airport for 3 years, only to get pushed away.
I've endeavoured to move their position through logic and argument, but they just do not want to listen. They seem to have missed the point that it isn't actually an airport and that there's only one place that aircraft can operate.
Long-time pilot Gerald Grocott has been watching this in disgrace.
We've degraded rail services into Hawke's Bay. There's no passenger services anymore. We degraded Napier-Taupo Road, State Highway 5, with speed limits and lack of infrastructure support. And I'm worried we're going to do exactly the same to Hawke's Bay Airport.
He says without the smaller operators, what they call general aviation, or GA, there won't be an aviation industry.
The regional airport's job is really to provide a vegetable garden, a nurturing ground for these young folks, so that when the airlines or the industry in general wants it, they can come and use their little knife and cut off however many pilots or engineers they want. But if the garden isn't nurtured, there's nothing to yield.
The airport's publicly owned, 50% by the Crown, 26% by Napier City Council and 24% by Hastings District Council. Mr Grocott organised a meeting with Napier Mayor Kirsten Wise to express their concerns. But Ms Wise says she can't interfere with the airport's business decisions.
As a shareholder of the airport, it isn't our role to get involved in operational matters such as that. So the bulk of our conversation was actually around the governance of the airport.
Together, the Napier and Hastings councils choose 2 of the 4 board members. Ms Wise says will appoint new board members later this year.
We're always, reviewing what the skill mix is on any boards that we're responsible for appointing. So, certainly when we look to recruit for the next appointment, we'll be ensuring that we've got the appropriate skill to slot into the existing board members.
Hawke's Bay Airport CEO Rob Stratford has been in the job for about 2 months. He wouldn't talk to RNZ, but a PR representative sent through a statement attributed to him.
We are actively engaged with the general aviation community at Hawke's Bay Airport. I've recently had a constructive meeting with a representative of the community who reported back to the group's AGM this week and have a number of meetings planned with individual members.
Gerald Grocott, who met with Mr Stratford, agreed that the meeting was very constructive. As well as a former CEO leaving in the last year, there's been changes in some of its other key management positions like operations and commercial managers.
The All Whites will have to wait another 4 years for the opportunity to play at the FIFA World Cup finals after a heartbreaking loss in their final qualification game. New Zealand was beaten 1-0 by Costa Rica in Doha, with the All Whites having a goal controversially ruled out by video review. Barry Guy with this report.
Instead it's into where Wood is. Chris Wood! New Zealand level in Doha! And it is their main man, Chris Wood!
If this is overturned, this will be a shocking decision.
Well, to me, that's a travesty.
The Sky Sports commentators scathing of the decision by the officiating team in the game, overturning what would have been the equaliser. New Zealand fell behind early, had that goal disallowed, and then had Costa Barbarouses sent off in the second half. Video reviews were introduced to get decisions right, but it's still up to interpretation by the officials, and the disallowed goal didn't go down well with these Auckland fans.
We were the better side. We got robbed by a decision, but that's FIFA.
How was the game?
Pretty shit. Devastating. Fairly close, yeah, just that's football though, yeah. Comes down to what it is on the day. Couldn't get it in the back of the net. Did once, but overturned, so is what it is though.
Coach Danny Hay wouldn't go so far as to say the refereeing cost them a place at the World Cup, but he says it certainly wasn't up to standard.
You looked at what Australia and Peru had last night with good quality European officiating. I thought FIFA have made a mistake there in such an important game. I think they've let us down by putting somebody in charge that clearly has not officiated at this sort of level.
Kevin Fallon, who helped coach the 1982 All-White World Cup team, isn't a fan of video reviews and says unfortunately decisions like these can happen to underdogs when they're playing a team ranked 70 places higher.
When a smaller nation plays a bigger nation, and Costa Rica is a much bigger football nation than we are, you always seem to get influenced by the more experienced, the better players, which they weren't, of course. We had some very good players. But that situation, if Barcelona's playing Gisborne City, they'll listen to Barcelona players. And he did that this morning with the New Zealand side. I felt they were robbed.
The players were reluctant to climb into the referee. Instead, winger Liberato Kakachi felt the side reacted well to all the decisions that went against them.
Despite going down early on, we dominated the game. We really put the game to the Costa Ricans. And obviously the decisions were out of our hands and we accepted it. And we really reacted well. And even with the red card, we showed, that we could really play and be a force to reckon with in the future. But the only thing, football's about scoring goals and defending the box. And obviously we didn't score, so we couldn't win the game.
The All Whites had 67% of possession and had more shots on goal than Costa Rica. But statistics don't win games, goals do. Keeper Ollie Sale says the result is going to sit heavily with him for some time.
I'll tell you what, I wish I was mid-season right now so I could switch my focus to something else, because I'm on holiday now and it's going to hurt for a while, because I'm not going to be able to scratch that itch for months probably.
While Sale has future tournaments to look forward to, it isn't the case for a number of senior players whose days in the international game could be numbered, including 33-year-old captain Winston Reid. Reid was a member of the 2010 team that reached the finals in South Africa. Also there was fellow defender Ben Sigmund, who says with player depth in New Zealand growing steadily, an exciting 4 years lie ahead.
They're all young players, so they're only going to develop and get even better for the next one. So it's exciting for what the next 4 years holds. The amount of players that are over in Europe and playing professionally now, there's a lot more to choose from, and they're only getting better.
So Costa Rica become the 32nd and last team to qualify for the World Cup finals at the end of the year. It's their third consecutive World Cup and sixth in total, and they can now look forward to group matches against Spain, Germany and Japan. As for the All Whites, they have to wait another 4 years, but qualification should be a bit easier for the 2026 tournament in North America, with Oceania now having an automatic spot in an expanded 48-team tournament.
It's 10 to 6. Kia mau tonu mai. Stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ. A lot of you getting in touch about the GP shortage. Mike says our two main med schools allow entry to people who are very good at passing exams with merit, yet completely lack the nous to be a great doctor. Many of them should not be let loose in a hospital. This one, doctor shortage. Government just has to pay more for doctors in out-of-the-way areas and support. Lucy raises something that a few of you have. Lucy says, why not talk of the impact of nurse practitioners can have as part of the solution? We're highly trained professionals who can assess, diagnose and prescribe just like doctors. Funding more of us is a very appropriate solution to improve health access issues in our country. And this one too. Move from Warkworth to Whangarei. No GP for our family with a Down syndrome child. Have to drive back to Warkworth, almost 200 kilometres, for a visit. Well, that's close to useless, isn't it? Do keep your feedback coming. Text us on 2101 or tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. New safety barriers on the sides of a state highway near the Hurewhenua town of Levin are making some residents feel anything but safe. They say turning into their properties has become a daredevil act, but roading officials say they'll get used to the new road layout. Our Manawatu reporter Jimmy Ellingham pulled over for a look.
State Highway 57 is a busy road used by many when travelling between Palmerston North and Wellington to bypass Levin. Barriers have sprung up alongside sections of it to the south of the town, leaving residents nervous about turning right into their driveways.
What's different is there's nowhere to pull off that road. Originally, before the barriers went in, we had a slight area where we could pull to the left and get ourselves off the road to wait until this road is clear to turn right, and now there's nothing.
That's Molly Page, who's lived on the road for more than 20 years but now feels nervous entering the driveway half a dozen properties share. She says with less room on the left shoulder, she comes to a stop in the driving lane waiting to turn right, but angering motorists behind her. Drivers are supposed to do 50 kilometres an hour at the moment during roadworks, but RNZ didn't see any going that slow this week in what's normally a 100 kilometre zone, with plenty of trucks rumbling by.
People travel very fast. So it's not unusual that somebody comes along at 120 k's. And you're sitting in the middle of that road. What do? Do they see you? Are they going to see you? How soon are they going to see you?
Hoping they'd see me, I decided to turn into Molly Page's driveway as she sat in the passenger seat, telling me how to do it.
We've got no traffic coming, towards us or whatever, but the issue would be traffic coming towards you or traffic behind you.
So I had to stop in the middle of the road there.
Yeah.
There's nowhere for me to pull over, so there's no cars coming, and that's fine.
Yeah.
But what happens when there's cars coming?
Right. You have just got to hope that they see you.
At least I didn't have to contend with heavy traffic, but Molly Page says it's not as quiet during peak hours. Neighbour John Andrews says he feels he's in the hands of other drivers and their abilities when he turns for home.
It's not impossible, but it's uncomfortable, and you're not sure about whether the person driving the other vehicle, how are they going to react to you, whether you're in the centre of the road or on the left. Do they know what to do? Because we don't know what to do.
So what can they do? I asked the AA's Chris Clark.
There's no answer. If they had a small car, and if they got as closest to the barrier as they could, there would possibly be room for another small car to pass.
Waka Kotahi's Director of Regional Relationships, Linda Stewart, says the road is actually wider and the barriers and a wider centre line are safety features. She says there's a 1.5 metre shoulder to the left of the road that should leave enough room for people to safely pull over. However, getting used to new barriers isn't easy.
People don't like to travel too close to them initially, but over time, as people get used to them, they become more confident that they can pull right over towards them quite safely.
Linda Stewart says Waka Kotahi staff will get in touch with residents to talk through their concerns.
Waka Kotahi is committed to working with them, so we want to understand the specific site concerns that they have in more detail and then see if there is anything further that is required or can be done to help them feel more safe when they access their properties or come out onto our state highway.
She says roadside safety barriers are highly effective at preventing deaths and serious injuries.
A pair of 12-year-old schoolgirls with big dreams have launched a skateboarding charity that they're hoping to take global. What started out as a plea for skateboard donations has now become an ongoing charity being run by the pair. Reporter Louise Tanuth and camera operator Rica paid them a visit.
During lockdown, this is where Skate It Forward all began for 12-year-olds Sienna and Bella at Randwick Skate Park in West Auckland. Both now super keen skateboarders, they reckon they spend more time skating than walking.
You feel so free and you have no problems and you feel part of something as well.
But they quickly realised not everyone that was keen to skate had a board. So they put the call out and have been inundated with over 200 donations towards skateboards, scooters, helmets and protective pads.
It's nice to see the joy on their faces when they get stuff. The parents are really grateful as well because some of them can't afford the stuff as well, but their kids want to do it.
But their bid to share the skateboarding love has now led to a growing skating community.
There's heaps more now. And they're not always swapping and stuff because they used to share their stuff with their cousins and stuff, but now they don't. They've got their own.
And lasting friendships.
It's good to see the kids when we give away the stuff to see how happy they are, and then we can see them more at the skate parks too, and we've kind of created a friend group as well with them.
They alternate between Randwick and Waiuku Skate Park and try and visit others around Auckland when they can. And they're also now offering tips and training to those that want it.
We'll kind of teach them the motion first, and then we'll help them by holding their hands, and then we'll do 2 hands to 1 hand to no hand.
They run the charity with the help of their friends and family, and of course their mums Louise and Chantel, who even don their helmets and join in too.
We're now skateboard mums. And it's all because of these 2 girls. We're almost sort of thankful to them because it's given us this passion. You know, we're so passionate about helping now and getting this charity to a point where we can help everybody, all kids.
To see those kids' faces and for them to look forward to us coming each week has been we've got our own kids, but then we have this community of kids that come running over.
During the weekend, Sienna and Bella are often fundraising, holding events or planning their next business moves. That's on top of school and other sports too.
It's all right because we can multitask.
They've already got the T-shirts and hope to open a youth centre with supervisors to make sure the park's more of a safe space in the evenings, but have some even bigger plans for the future.
We didn't know it would become this big. We want it to go really big and we're wide, but it's going to take a while.
And check out the video for that story. It'll be on our webpage. A lot of you getting in touch about the price of diesel and it escalating. Kevin from Fuel Watch in Hamilton's got in touch. Thanks, Kevin. He says diesel ranges from $2.53 to $3 per litre in Hamilton, thereabouts. Kaikoura, $2.74 to $2.84, and diesel in Timaru is $2.79 a litre. Another person says, was it a good idea to shut down Marsden Point? And another listener, well, not just one listener, a few of you have got in touch to say, when will EVs pay road user service charges? A free ride for wokesters, says this listener. And also on, another one there that says, all of which shows us how dependent we are on fossil fuels, even more important that we kick the habit. On the subject of jib, you're wondering what architects and designers are up to. Perhaps architects specify jib because, in their expert opinion, it is their preferred choice. One may be able to appear on your program, they say, to explain their reasons why the preference. Sandy, on the other hand, says architects and designers let the side down by stipulating a product that was in short supply. Andrew says, what's the kerfuffle over jib board? I use MDF, medium density fibre board from a Nelson factory made from our wall of wood. Easier to handle, easier to get, building code rated. Get onto it, Kiwis, says Andrew.
RNZ News at 6. Good evening. Kia ora tātou. I'm Evie Ashton. GPs say primary healthcare is overloaded amid a dire countrywide shortage of doctors. Many patients are struggling just to get an appointment, with some driving hundreds of kilometres just to get an appointment. Waikato University Professor of Population Health Ross Lawrenson told Checkpoint the problems are chronic and the answer is to train more doctors.
We put up the proposal at the University of Waikato for a new medical school. New Zealand only has 2 medical schools. There is a lack of diversity of the sorts of medical programs that are available in New Zealand, and there's no doubt that we need to be training more doctors for the future.
Ross Lawrenson says the crisis he saw 17 years ago has only become worse. The Ministry for Business, Innovation and Employment is encouraging councils to approve alternatives to jib board, but Auckland Council says it started doing this 6 months ago. Fletcher Building's jib dominates about 95% of the plasterboard market, but demand is outstripping supply. Jeff Farrenson from the council's regulatory services team told Checkpoint it's been allowing minor substitutions on site because inspectors were getting lots of requests to change products.
So out of the 800 inspections we're doing a day, we're getting about 40 or 50 requests to change products. So we had to basically make a change in terms of our process to make it easier.
Jeff Farrenson says designers often specify jib in their consent application, which is where the issue starts. He says the council's also seeing substitution requests for plywood and for insulation. The local share market has been unable to hold on to modest gains and closed lower for a 5th consecutive session. The benchmark NZX 50 index fell in early trading but turned positive early in the afternoon before fading at the end to finish 5 points lower. Some of the stocks battered in recent sessions have risen a few cents as some investors looked for bargains, although the declining stocks outnumbered the rises 2-1. Tomorrow's trading is set to be driven by the outcome of the US Federal Reserve rate decision due early tomorrow morning. The AA is warning that the rising cost of diesel will put more pressure on household budgets. The price per litre has doubled in a year and now sits just below $3. Terry Collins from the AA told Checkpoint it's a serious problem as most farm vehicles, such as harvesters, run on diesel.
So it's going to have a huge inflationary effect. For some farmers, it's just become significant inputs into their harvesters, their tractors, and the machinery that they use to harvest food.
Terry Collins says he expects both diesel and petrol prices to continue to rise. The Green Party is calling on the new COVID-19 Minister, Ayesha Verrill, to ensure vulnerable communities are prioritised as part of the pandemic response. An independent review released yesterday concludes the Health Ministry failed to equitably meet the needs of Māori and Pacific peoples during last August's Delta outbreak. The Greens COVID-19 spokesperson, Tianau Tuiono, says the findings are entirely unsurprising. He says he hopes Dr Verrill will take the lessons on board and focus on those people who need to be listened to. The Greens also want a pandemic action plan for schools to be put in place to keep students safe over winter. 5,500 new community cases of COVID were reported today, and another 11 people with the virus have died. Operators of smaller planes in Hawke's Bay say the local airport is forgetting its core business. The regional airport is investing in solar farms and business parks, and some say that's at the expense of aviation. Our Hawke's Bay reporter Tom Kitchen has more.
Some operators have tried to build hangars and get permission for their private business planes to take off from the airport in Napier, but they say there's been pushback or they've been ignored. They fear that the airport is also neglecting its role as a training ground for young engineers and pilots. The region's new terminal opened last year, and there's been a lot of turnover in senior management since then. Airport CEO Rob Stratford has been in the job for about 2 months. He wouldn't speak to RNZ, but said in a statement that he's meeting with some of the smaller operators.
And an international team led by Australian astronomers say they've discovered the fastest growing black hole of the last 9 billion years. The black hole, a part of space where matter has collapsed in on itself, consumes the equivalent of 1 Earth every second. The discovery was made with telescopes in New South Wales and Cape Town in South Africa. Astronomers hope the find will offer clues about the formation of galaxies. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights Classics, Professor Mark Masterton. A few years back, he talked to me about homosexuality in ancient Rome. Tonight, how they had a gay old time in Byzantine. Lars Ostenfeld discusses his documentary Into the Ice and how there's less of it to get into these days, especially in Greenland. And this week's Hump Prize, the complete works of William Shakespeare, because all the world's a stage. On Nights of me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
You're back with Lisa Owen on Checkpoint next. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Thursday. In the west from Northland to Kapiti, also for Coromandel and the Central High Country, showers. Some are possibly heavy, easing this evening, then becoming more frequent and heavier again tomorrow, south of Te Koiti. Bay of Plenty, Gisborne to Wairarapa and also Wellington. Generally fine, but isolated showers in the Bay of Plenty, the Tararua district and for North Wellington. Showers are clearing from the Bay of Plenty this evening. Bulla and Westland, showers turning to rain tomorrow, isolated thunderstorms today. Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, also for North and Central Otago. Mainly fine, but showers are developing south of Kaikoura tomorrow afternoon or evening. Dunedin, Clutha, Southland and Fiordland, showers some heavy, becoming confined to Fiordland and the south coast this evening. Showers are spreading elsewhere again tomorrow afternoon, snows lowering to 600 metres tomorrow evening. And the Chatham Islands, showers, some heavy with hail and gale westerlies. It's 6 minutes past 6. I'll update you with the latest news headlines at 6:30.
Kia ora rā e ho, no mai hoki mai, this is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. With GP waiting rooms busting at the seams, it's even bleaker for those seeking specialty care. It can take at least 13 years to train a hospital specialist. New Zealand currently has less than half the number of rheumatologists it needs, and the Ministry of Health data projects demand will outstrip supply for a number of specialties, with many expected to reach their twilight years before there's anyone ready to fill their shoes. Joining us now is Association of Salaried Medical Specialists Executive Director Sarah Dalton. Kia ora, Sarah.
Kia ora, Lisa.
Can you give us a bit of an overview? I mean, how many specialists do we need? How short are we? Do we know?
Yeah, well, we do our best to track that, and our estimates suggest we have around about a 24% shortage of specialists across the board. It's been tracking between 20 and 25% in our surveys for the last few years. Our latest estimate in numbers to match the per capita provision that Australia has, we need 1,500 more specialists.
So where are we going to get them from? Because you can't magic them up overnight.
No, we can't. In fact, the fastest way we get them at the moment is to import them from other countries. So international medical graduates, overseas trained specialists make up over 40% of our current specialist workforce. And in some specialty areas like psychiatry, they make up 60%. But even bringing someone in from overseas can take more than a year by the time all of the stages of, employing and notice periods and immigration criteria and meeting the medical council criteria for registration here are met. So that's not even an instant solution. The long-term solution probably is to grow more doctors of our own. It's just a very long-term solution, and there are capacity issues at every level, from university all the way through to hospital placements.
Okay, let's talk about that. Why can't we just say we're going to push through 100 more doctors, i.e. in the first year, medical will take 100 more in the first year? Why can't we do that?
Well, when we talked about this at our conference a couple of years ago, our speakers from both Otago and Auckland med schools suggested to us that their current capacity was constrained and they thought they were pretty much at their limits. But assuming that was overcome, or, as was discussed earlier on the show, another med school was opened up, it's what happens when they get into their final years at med school and then out into the workforce as a house surgeon and a registrar. Those roles have to be, the clinical placements, the work that those junior doctors do in hospitals has to be supervised by specialist doctors. And so in order to appropriately supervise, train and develop those young doctors or less experienced doctors, we need enough senior doctors to do that. And the colleges that oversee medical training, they determine what the criteria are for being able to be an accredited training site and how many people can safely be trained.
Are those requirements too difficult to meet, too onerous, do you think?
They vary from college to college, and no, I think they're developed to ensure that we have some of the best trained doctors in the world. So I don't think it's a matter of dropping standards. I think it's really a matter of significantly investing in workforce. And, that comes with a big price tag, and we're not having really well-developed conversations about what is the true cost of developing a healthcare system that really does deliver when people need it to. What are we prepared to pay for?
But Sarah, you've got a bit of a catch-22. You've just articulated it perfectly. You need more doctors, but you can't have more doctors because you don't have enough existing doctors to train the new doctors in their first couple of years out of school.
Yes, it's a tricky one. So I guess it's a mixture of both of those things, and I think the starting point would be actually making a commitment to lifting numbers. So back in 2010, our union signed a memorandum of understanding with the DHBs and that we would work together to try and match the per capita numbers of specialists to match Australia's. And within, I think, the first 3 years, we dropped behind by 200 FTE, and now we find that we're 1,500 FTE behind. There has just been no serious commitment to that. So, it's really difficult now because we're so far behind. But we don't let perfect get in the way of good, and we have to start somewhere, right?
Right. So the new health entity, right, it's supposed to have an element of professional, look into the future, workforce development. Do you have any faith that will help solve the problem?
We have absolutely strong expectations. They'd better deliver. It's going to be a high price to us all in terms of our health and wellbeing if it doesn't. Margie Upper has stood up a workforce task force. We have yet to see what the exact scope of that task force will be, but the point of it is that it only exists as long as it's required. I fear it might be for quite a long time. We're really eager to find out how well equipped that's going to be and what their focus is. The issue, I guess, is that we're not just short of senior and junior doctors, we're also short of nurses and allied health staff. So there is the potential that a focus on doctors might not be their initial priority. It may be for other health workers. And that's understandable, but it will be frustrating if that's what happens.
Sarah, before you go, can you just give us a couple of examples? Which specialties are in really dire straits?
It's almost like pick that specialty, but dermatology, rheumatology, radiation oncology, psychiatry. We're doing some work with the Rheumatology Association at the moment. As I speak, there is no rheumatologist at Tauranga, at Palmerston North, at Timaru, at Dunedin, at Invercargill, and we know that, and there's a number of other sites that have some rheumatology capability but who have got vacancies they haven't been able to fill, so they're understaffed.
So what happens if you need that service? Do you get shipped off somewhere else?
You wait. you wait a very long time. And one of the issues with a specialty like rheumatology is a lot of the people they see, most of the people they see have long-term chronic conditions. So the national measure of who's being seen is the first specialist appointment. That's only the tip of the iceberg when it comes to rheumatology, because the vast bulk of the patients being seen are on what are known as follow-up appointments. You know, the first specialist appointment is just the beginning. And most of these people aren't going to be cured. They have conditions that need to be managed and supported over a long period of time. They not only need specialist appointments, but they also need clinical nurse specialists to support that work with follow-up, and there are massive shortages there as well.
Thanks for joining us, Sarah. That is Sarah Dalton, who's from the Association of Salaried Medical Specialists. Pharmac is overhauling the criteria for funded prescriptions of a safe sex drug commonly used by gay men. Pre-exposure prophylaxis, or PrEP, can reduce the risk of being infected with HIV by up to 99%. And as Jake McKee reports, it's been welcomed by safe sex advocates who've for years been pushing for easier access to the drug.
The current rules to get a funded PrEP prescription are confronting. They include people having to perform specific sexual acts and then detailing it to their doctor. But from the 1st of July, that's gone. Pharmac's changing the rules to patients being at risk of but testing negative for HIV, and their doctor thinking it's clinically appropriate for them. HIV peer support organisation Body Positive Executive Director Mark Fisher says the changes will help remove stigmas around the drug.
A lot of people weren't comfortable asking for it because of the conditions, because people don't like talking about sex with their doctor, right? That's the reality. And so people weren't confident to go and have those conversations, potentially. And the uptake has been low. It's been 4 years and we've only got around 1,600 people on it.
Pharmac now estimates there will be 5,500 PrEP users in the next 5 years. Mark Fisher says the drug buying agency has gone above and beyond the 2020 recommendations for change.
So this change makes it eligible to all gay men as well as to other people who may be at risk, right, including like women or, sex workers or those everybody who could benefit from it.
Burnett Foundation Aotearoa Chief Executive Joe Rich says it's a great step towards the Foundation's goal of eliminating local HIV transmission by 2025.
We know that if we're really going to achieve our goal of HIV elimination, we need these new tools like PrEP to be accessible by everyone who needs them.
He says there now needs to be a focus on improving doctors' knowledge of the drug and how to prescribe it appropriately. This was echoed by Dr. Peter Saxton, one of the country's top sexual health researchers. He made a submission on Pharmac's proposal, which included comments submitted to the Sex and Prevention of Transmission study he's working on. Some of those comments have been revoiced.
When I disclosed to a sexual health nurse that I wanted to access PrEP, she made a comment about how all gay and bisexual men should stop being promiscuous.
I asked my old GP to prescribe me PrEP. His response was that it was disgusting and you should just use a condom.
Pharmac Director of Operations Lisa Williams says there was overwhelming support for the change. She says it's important people realise the rule change doesn't mean you'll just get the drug simply by asking for it.
Just want to be clear that funding criteria are different to clinical practice guidelines, and so clinicians will still need to have conversations with their patients about risk profiles, etc.
Other funding decisions by Pharmac include blood and breast cancer medicines and widening access to 8 multiple sclerosis treatments.
And it's 17 minutes past 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. A lot of feedback still coming in on the issue of GPs and shortages of specialist doctors. This person, Susan's got in touch to say, I've had a nurse practitioner since coming to Otaki, as there's only one GP practice here, and she says that my nurse practitioner is excellent, so good as any GP I have ever had. Stuart, who works in the Waikato Emergency Department, says I'm frequently seeing people living less than 5 minutes from the hospital, but they elect to keep their GPs in Auckland, Fielding or even Christchurch up to 10 years after they've moved to the district. It's not just a lack of GPs putting the workload onto hospital EDs, it's the people without the common sense to register with a local general practice. Nikki says she moved to Timaru and got accepted into a doctor's practice almost immediately, 5 minutes drive from home. Moved to Timaru, she says. And Sarah's got in touch to say, listening to the daily diet of resourcing and staffing issues makes me wonder why we don't have a ministry for looking around corners. Why are these issues so often a surprise? Why can't we do better at long-term planning, foreseeing future need and plugging gaps with training or immigration? Good point. And as you may have heard, Sarah, Health New Zealand is part of that new entity. There's developing a task force to look at future workforce needs. The first flight scheduled to take a small group of asylum seekers from the UK to Rwanda was cancelled today after a last-minute legal challenge. The UK government's scheme to send some migrants who arrive illegally via the English Channel to Rwanda has horrified some human rights groups. The BBC's Mark Labelle has more.
Going nowhere. Boris Johnson's Rwanda plan to cut immigration grounded for now. This flight was originally meant to take over 100 asylum seekers to Rwanda, then just a handful, and finally none, following a series of legal challenges. It's particularly galling for the government, coming on the day more than 300 people arrived in Dover after attempting to cross the channel in small boats, the exact journey this policy is meant to deter. But Britain's partner in this, the Rwandan government, remains on board.
We are undeterred. We are committed to this partnership, and we stand ready to welcome the migrants when they do arrive in Rwanda. So we'll wait to see what happens, but on our part, we are ready to receive the migrants.
The European Court of Human Rights, which is separate to the European Union and to which the UK is a signatory, has the final say in human rights issues. It ruled asylum applicants would face a real risk of irreversible harm in Rwanda, contradicting a ruling by judges in London. One asylum seeker spoke of his fear of deportation.
Since I learned that I'm among those to be deported to Rwanda, I can hardly communicate and eat. I'm restless. I prefer to die, not to be transferred there. It's shocking.
Home Secretary Priti Patel has said that it is very surprising that the European Court of Human Rights has intervened, despite repeated earlier success in our domestic courts. We will not be deterred from doing the right thing, she said, and delivering our plans to control our nation's borders. Adding preparation for the next flight begins now. This row could also fuel the UK governing party's election promise to reform human rights laws affecting the UK, after Boris Johnson said the government may very well have to change the law to help with the policy.
What the criminal gangs are doing and what those who effectively are abetting the work of the criminal gangs are doing is undermining people's confidence in the safe and legal system, undermining people's general acceptance of immigration.
Sending asylum seekers to Rwanda is a policy that divides public opinion. A recent poll showing 44% in favour and 40% against, with the majority of those in favour Conservative voters and the majority against Labour ones. The plan has yet to get off the ground, but is not dead. Attention now turns to how judges will rule when they examine the entire Rwanda removals policy next month.
mRNA vaccines have been vital to help fight COVID-19, and now there's potential for the same biotechnology to be used to treat cancer. Scientists who have worked in the area for decades are running clinical trials aimed at targeting certain types of cancer. CNN's Sanjay Gupta reports on one trial where a pancreatic cancer patient now has newfound hope.
In December 2020, mRNA vaccines started changing the course of the pandemic. At the same time, that same technology was possibly changing Barbara Brigham's life in an entirely different way.
She said, I just want you to know that you have pancreatic cancer.
Pancreatic cancer is one of the most aggressive forms of the disease. And that motivates Dr. Vinod Balachandran at Memorial Sloan Kettering to find a cure for it.
We really need new treatments for patients. Stay tuned. Right now, the immunotherapies that are used to treat cancer patients, they only work in about 20% of patients. So about 80% of the time, the current immunotherapies are not very effective.
So Dr. Balachandran teamed up with BioNTech. You may remember them as a developer of an mRNA COVID-19 vaccine. Their goal? to begin trialing mRNA as a pancreatic cancer treatment.
I was willing to try whatever would prevent me from having a shorter life than I really wanted to have.
Cancer has challenged scientists for years, in part because the cells continuously mutate, making them harder for the immune system to detect. But that's exactly why BioNTech's co-founders, Dr. Uhar Sahin and Dr. Özlem Türeci, have been working with mRNA for decades to see if they could outsmart cancer.
How do you know it is specific really to that cancer and not to healthy human cells in that particular patient's body?
That was actually the last 2 decades which we invested in to identify how we get the best targets, the best mutations, the best molecules to recognize cancer cells and distinguish them from normal cells.
Remember how mRNA works in COVID-19 vaccines. It essentially gives our immune system detailed instructions to make a specific part of the virus, so our immune system can then learn to recognize it and create antibodies against it. Those instructions can then be tailored and tweaked quickly if the virus evolves. The idea is this could work in a similar way, but for cancer.
Some of Australia's major retailers are using facial recognition technology to crack down on thefts. Bunnings has confirmed its use, and now Kmart is trialling the use of special cameras at its stores in Australia. But there are concerns about people's privacy, as the ABC's Annie Guest reports.
Heading into a North Brisbane Bunnings, this couple is surprised that facial recognition technology is part of the deal.
No, didn't know that.
No idea. Yeah, didn't know at all.
There's a little sign, that red sign over there, just to the right of the door.
Ah, okay. Yeah, I wouldn't even look twice at that.
No, wouldn't think about it at all.
It feels a bit more invasive than just a camera.
A normal camera would do the job.
Yeah.
Consumer advocacy group Choice has surveyed 1,000 shoppers, and spokesperson Kate Bauer says about 75% didn't know their biometric data could be captured in shops, and they didn't like it.
Kmart, Bunnings and The Good Guys are using facial recognition technology in their stores, and customers are in the dark. It's equivalent to Kmart, Bunnings or The Good Guys collecting your fingerprints or DNA every time you walk into the shop.
In a statement, Bunnings Chief Executive Simon McDowell says the technology helps prevent theft and repeated abuse of staff and customers, uses which he says are consistent with the Privacy Act. A Kmart statement says it's trialling the technology for similar reasons. Both companies say customers are told about it on their websites and via signs at store entrances. Kate Bauer from Choice says another company was told to destroy facial images.
So last year, the Information Commission looked into the use of facial recognition by 7-Eleven and found that the business use that they stated was not a good enough reason to use such an invasive use of technology that captures such sensitive and private information. And that including the information in an online privacy policy or having store signage was not nearly sufficient to inform customers of its use.
A spokesperson for the Information Commissioner says the concerns raised by Choice will be considered, adding that in most situations, biometric information mustn't be collected unless it's reasonably necessary for an organisation's functions or activities. The ABC contacted The Good Guys through its owner JB Hi-Fi, but we're yet to receive a response.
The striking sunsets noticed by New Zealanders in recent weeks are caused by leftovers from Tonga's volcanic eruption. And NIWA says the phenomenon, which produces vibrant blue and purple hues, could last for months. Felix Walton has more.
NIWA photographer Lana Young snapped a striking purple sky over Wellington the other night. She says the best time to catch the phenomenon on camera is just before dusk.
Before the sunset, you get really nice contrast and bright colours, and then also just after the sunset, it's super handy to have a tripod because it's starting to get a bit darker, but when the sun has just gone below the horizon, that's when you get really cool colours.
NIWA forecaster Nava Fadayev says her team has been flooded with questions as New Zealanders spot the otherworldly twilights. She says the eruption of the Hunga Tonga Hunga Ha'apai volcano 5 months ago sent aerosols, particles suspended in the air 20 kilometres into the stratosphere.
Which is an unusual result. Generally, we don't see aerosols at this height. Those aerosols have been moving poleward, so closer towards us, and so now there's an increase in concentrations of these aerosols in the skies above New Zealand.
The particles scatter and bend light as the sun dips and rises past the horizon. Ms. Fadayev says this is not the first time it's happened.
It's actually quite common with large volcanic eruptions because they put so many particulates and things in the atmosphere, and they stick around for quite a long time. When Mount Pinatubo erupted in 1991, there was reports of radiant sunsets for up to 18 months after the fact.
She says the same could happen here.
The switch isn't going to turn off kind of tomorrow or anything. We're not sure exactly, but we're expecting we could see vibrant sunsets for even months to come. So I think at the moment the concentrations are still increasing, so it's certainly not going away in the short term.
The weird and wonderful phenomenon is sure to keep Aotearoa's photographers busy.
Some of your final thoughts on the GP shortage. This listener says the question that needs asking is when will the Medical Council allow doctors and surgeons from countries outside of European training to work in New Zealand? And Dr. Craig from Mount Albert's got in touch to say our overwhelming chronic lifestyle disease crisis, which is sinking our health system, will only get worse regardless of recruitment unless we turn down the demand tap with strong public health measures like a sugar tax and junk food marketing, especially at children. We're treating lifestyle conditions with pills and operations, which is a bottomless pit. Thanks for being with us today. Stay with the Late News team. It's going to keep you updated throughout the night. And tomorrow from 5 a.m, First Up's going to speak to Grant Robertson about fuel prices and the GP shortage. Do have a great evening. Kei te hoki mai anō a pōpō whānau, pō mārie.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Kia ora tātou, ko Evie Ashton tēnei. GPs say primary health care is overloaded amid a dire countrywide shortage of doctors. The Ministry for Business, Innovation and Employment is encouraging councils to approve alternatives to Gibboard, something Auckland Council says it's been doing for 6 months. The AA is warning that the rising cost of diesel will put more pressure on household budgets. And the local share market has been unable to hold on to modest gains today and